Warning: this video contains material that some may find disturbing. What's a family secret you didn't get told until you were older that made things finally make sense? My pet rabbit got attacked a couple years after I got it. My parents found it dead and replaced it before I found out. I just thought my rabbit lived super long, but it was actually 2 rabbits. This happened over 10 years ago, and I just found out last year. My grandfather was in prison. Prisons in my country don't look like conventional ones you see in the movies. They kinda look like construction sites. Whenever we visited him, I just always assumed he was in charge since he was the oldest person there. Turns out he got there for shooting my mom's abuser point blank in the head. Great guy, though. He definitely does not regret it. I had overheard my dad telling someone that his father had died in a car accident. I interjected and said, "He died of a heart attack in a car. That's not a car accident." I was then let in on the family secret. My grandfather did not die of a heart attack in the garage. He died because my grandmother accidentally hit him with the car. What happened was, she was in the driveway trying to back out, and he was standing in front of the car guiding her. She thought she was in reverse. She was looking back and pressed the gas. The car went forward and pinned my grandfather against the garage door. He died later that day at the hospital. They had been married for 52 years. She never drove after that. She would tell people he died of a heart attack, that she had found him in the garage, which is where I got that story from. I think that was a kind of coping mechanism so that she wouldn't have to deal with the truth. She lived another 23 years with that guilt. My mom dropped my sister on her head when she was 8 months old, causing her to be mentally disabled. My mom always said it was genetic, but after I did a DNA test, I found nothing like that runs in the family. For 40 years, my mom lied about it to me and finally admitted it. It explains so much. When my parents left the Jehovah's Witnesses, we were finally able to celebrate Christmas for the first time. I was 8 and my brother was 6, and even though we had been taught that Santa wasn't real all our lives, we were still psyched for presents and parties. My parents put up all kinds of decorations, including a string of large holiday bells on the front door's doorknob, so that if anyone came inside, they'd make a loud jingling noise. After Christmas ended, those bells stayed on the door for years. My parents told me that the bells were festive and that they liked them there. My younger brother and I never questioned it. The jingling noise soon became the official "Dad's home from work" signal. Years later, as an adult, I mentioned the bells to my dad. He told me that they were kept on the door year-round in case our relatives tried to kidnap my brother and me to return us to the church. I didn't know my uncle's roommate was his partner until I was a teenager, years after his death. I also didn't know he died of AIDS and had been a major activist, going to D.C. and pouring ashes of dead friends out on the White House lawn to shame Congress into funding research. My older family members are Catholic, and Grandma thought AIDS was his punishment for being gay. His partner never contracted it, and he's one of my closest uncles to this day, even though he's not related to me, and it's been 20 years. He has never missed a single major achievement of my life. My dad once tried to murder someone, attacked him with a knife in a fit of rage. I found out when he told the story, rather nonchalantly, in a Bible study I attended with him as an adult. At the time, I was struggling to come to terms with the violence in my home and worrying that I was somehow to blame, or that if people knew things that happened to me, they'd think I somehow deserved it. Knowing that my dad straight up tried to murder a guy helped me come to terms with the idea that really, he can be a cruel person, and that victims shouldn't feel blame for that. Learned that my grandmother's husband was a pedophile. All of a sudden, I knew why my uncle was so weird and would pick me up and carry me away rather than let me stay alone in a room with him. For the longest time, I thought my uncle was a real prude. My male cousins could all swim naked or run around in just their swim trunks, but my uncle made me always wear a swimsuit and put on a cover-up when I came out of the pool. He later admitted, "I was making sure no one could try to blame you. They blamed all his other victims for being too tempting." My uncle, bless his heart, wanted to kill that man so bad. For that matter, so did my dad. Finding out the pedo was, well, a pedo, made all of their muttering to each other at family gatherings make so much sense. My late father was a great dad, went to work and came home every night. Nothing was really out of the ordinary, except that he would ask me and my sisters to let him use the money from our piggy banks, because he knew we had it, but told us not to tell anyone and that he'd give it back. He would also really only have two moods. Either he's really cranky or extremely sweet. My sisters and I called it his nice face. This was all we knew until I was about in 8th grade. We went to a private school and my dad would tell us school was canceled, there was a gas leak, etc. And we would stay home. When we would go back to school, nobody else would know what we meant. One day, just before my graduation, my mom let out a scream. Our house was being foreclosed on. My dad hadn't been paying the mortgage and had been trying to cover up for the fact that he had been a functional cocaine addict. The nice face was when he was high. The school absences were because he'd spent tuition money on drugs and then had to pay before my mom caught wind. Apparently, it had gotten worse by this time, but he'd been an addict for more than 20 years and none of us knew. My sister and I both got UTIs at the same time when our family was staying at our grandparents' house. One day, my grandma took both of us aside and started what felt like an interrogation about whether any adults had touched us. Like, if something happened, you have to tell me right now. At the time, I felt gross, confused, and guilty, even though nothing had happened. It was just too intense. I later learned that my grandma had been sexually abused by her brother for years, and her mother refused to believe her. Last year, I found out that my dad isn't actually my biological father. He got me and my sisters those Ancestry DNA kits for Christmas to do for fun as a family, and once we got the results, it showed he wasn't my biological father. The fucked up thing is my mom knew the whole time and never told anyone. For 26 years, she kept this a secret and never had any intention of telling the truth. When I confronted her about it, she denied, and then once I showed her the results, she finally confessed. She'd had an affair with her college boyfriend while my dad was on a business trip for a couple months. After I found all of this out, things finally started making sense. She and I have never had a great relationship. I always envied other girls growing up that had great mother-daughter relationships and never understood why that couldn't be me. She was very verbally and sometimes physically abusive towards me growing up, but never towards my sisters. She knew I was the product of her affair and she was ashamed, so she would take it out on me. I was always told I was 6 weeks premature, but now I know she was lying so she could keep her timeline straight so my dad wouldn't find out about the affair. She had another affair with my soccer coach when I was 10, which led to my parents' divorce later that year, and blamed me for it. All of her wrongdoings, she would blame me for, and now it all makes sense. She's a really messed up woman. I'm not on speaking terms with her anymore, nor do I really care to meet my biological father. Maybe someday, but I'm not ready to. My relationship with my dad has never been better, and that's all I really care about. My best friend growing up would come to stay the night at my house on occasion because her parents were going to have a sleepover with their friends, and their friends were always another couple. 10-year-old me thought nothing of it. Didn't realize until I was an adult that her parents were swingers. I wonder if she ever figured it out. Dad sits us down sometime before Christmas and says, "I am a woman." Huh, and I thought he was gay. My mom knew and was really stressing about what would happen when my siblings and I were told. I also have an aunt who had been transgender all my life without me knowing. It's funny. In retrospect, these things seem obvious, but you only see what you want to see. And that concludes today's video about mind-blowing family secrets from Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any drama. This is Reddit Story Hour. Stay curious, stay kind, and see you in the next video.